Hare Krishna, welcome back to our new episode of Online Reading Retreat Labs. So, in the last session, we were reading chapter number 6 of Śrīla Prabhupāda-līlāmṛta. So, last time I didn't get a chance to show the hard copy of the book. So, this is how the hard copy looks like. If you like to buy a copy of this book or the entire series, you can connect with me. So, in the last episode, we have covered till the page number 158, and also we are reading from the database. So, today we will finish this chapter number 6. So, let's get started. And before that, let me share my screen so that you can also have a look into the online database. So, let me share my screen. So this is your online database, and we will go to the Śrīla Prabhupāda-līlāmṛta. And in this, we will be going for chapter number 6, An Unknown Friend. And we have covered till this. So there was a Bengali quote which says, I was trying to make a statue of Shiva, and let me start searching for that. Yes. This is the last quote which is quoted by Prabhupada. We have seen that. I was trying to make a statue of Shiva, but I ended up making a monkey. So we'll continue from here. In order to rid the world of misery and bringing out happiness, we have now created the atomic bomb. Seeing the all-pervading destruction which could take place in the near future by atomic reactions, Western thinkers have become greatly disturbed. Some people try to give consolation, saying that we will only use this atomic energy to bring about happiness in the world. This is also another enigma of illusory potency. The problem we explained was that the world was lacking Krishna conscious devotees, leaders under the influence of material nature who never saw the problems of the world. Materialistic illusion was especially prevalent in the Western countries, which Indians would not try to imitate. Abhay prophesied, however, that Krishna consciousness would one day reach the West. In the Western countries, there has never been any discussion of the relation between the atomic individual soul and the supreme soul, complete conscious personality of Godhead. Neither their activities nor the state in the ultimate perfection has been investigated. That's why, even though they have made so much material advancement, they are screaming in the burning poison of sensualism. We can be absolutely certain that India's real peace formula will one day reach their ears. Obvious articles began appearing regularly in the Gaudiya Patrika. His god brothers appreciated his writings. His denunciation of the materialistic mentality was reminiscent of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's. In Abhaya's hands, the Bhagavad Gita's concept of the Ashura demon was no longer merely a depiction of a mythological or legendary enemy. The Asuras has come to life in the modern day Hitler, Churchill, or even an Indian Prime Minister. But, as Abhay pointed out, his denunciation of the misleaders was not his own. He was only repeating the words of Krishna. During 1950-51, he continued his letter writing, attempting to gain a hearing with various organizations and leaders. He wrote the World Pacifist Committee, the President of India, and the Minister of Education. He wrote to the Indian Congress of Cultural Freedom, which wrote back suggesting that Abe had written them by mistake. He wrote to an official of the All Religions Conference in Bombay advising that because of their approach, nothing practical would come out of their conference. The practical solution is lying in the transcendental message of Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, as given by him in the Bhagavad Gita. On September 14, 1951, he corresponded with Daniel Bailey of the American Reporter, a magazine published by the American Embassy in New Delhi. Our pointed out that the philosophy of understanding the absolute truth as realized by the sages of India was higher than attempts to combine East and West. Mr. Bailey replied that he was aware of Eastern philosophical and religious influence in the West and cited the progress of a yoga mission in the New York City, which he said had some influence on the Protestants in America. But when Abe asked if one of his articles could appear in the American Reporter, Mr. Bailey replied, if we were to give considerable space in the American Reporter to say the Gita will all in fairness would have to give equal space to the other philosophies and our desires not to endorse or condemn any of them, but simply to assist in the better understanding. In a further reply, I differed with Mr. Bailey's contention that people should be encouraged to make their own interpretation of religion. Less intelligent men are always guided by those who are superior in knowledge in all spheres of life. Abe even wrote to the Ford Mount Foundation in Detroit, and his staff assistant wrote back, regret to advise you that we are unable to pursue suggestions concerning the establishment of an association of the intelligent class of people. The Ford Foundation has no program in which specific ideas such as you describe might be included. Although most of his suggestions were rejected, occasionally he received words of appreciation. A certain Dr. Muhammad Saeed, PhD, a professor of the University of Allahabad, wrote, you seem to have assimilated the universal teaching of ancient India, which is really laudable. And the governor of Uttar Pradesh replied, you are doing noble work, for nothing is noble than to be God minded. Not only was Abhay giving advice in his letters, but he was hinting that he could also give practical help. If he could obtain institutional backing, he was prepared to do many things: teach classes, manage temples, teach temple worship, and initiate devotees, as well as organize various kinds of field work to propagate the principles of Bhagavad Gita. Usually, he didn't spell out exactly how things would be done, but he pointed to the philosophical defects in the present methods and the superiority of working in accord with the Vedic literature. By the grace of his spiritual master, he knew the science of applying Bhagavad Gita to almost any situation if someone would only so interest. He could teach that person the superiority of working according to Bhagavad Gita. After attending a meeting in which a prominent industrialist had stressed harmonious relationships between labor and management in his factory, I wrote a long letter suggesting the main consider the good effects and the congregational chanting of Hare Krishna would produce. Since the factory had special employees, club and lounge, I suggested that the workers assemble there and chant Hare Krishna. I urged everyone to understand Krishna, surrender to Krishna, but most people had their own philosophies and took his spirit to be sectarian or proselytizing. But Bhagavad Gita was universal. I wrote, and God could not be omitted from any program, even in the name of a secular state. Krishna, as the father of all living beings, had jurisdiction over all programs, organizations, and governments. Indians especially should appreciate the universal scope of Bhagavad Gita. Although Abhay always had a plan of action behind his suggestions, he first sought the interest of his correspondent. There was not much interest, and he was repeatedly turned down, but he never felt discouraged. He always anticipated finding a sympathizer. He kept copies of all his letters and their replies. A word of appreciation or a slight show of interest from a correspondent being sufficient to elicit from Abhay another thoughtful reply. He had developed a keen sense of dedication to Lord Chaitanya's mission without expecting leadership from the Gaudiya Math. He still cherished the idea that his god brothers could soon come together and preach, but he didn't put any energy in the mathas, since to do so would mean to become involved in one of those factions. Staying clear of the Gaudiya Math's internal fray, Abhay continued his letter writing campaign alone, introducing himself as a preacher of Bhagavad Gita and editor of Back to Godhead magazine. In 1948, Abhay closed his Lucknow factory. He had fallen behind in employees' salaries, and since 1946, he had been paying past rent in installments. But when sales dropped off, continuing the factory became impossible. He lost everything. Srila Prabhupada. I started a big laboratory in Lucknow. Those were golden days. My business flourished like anything. Everyone in the chemical business knew. But then gradually everything dwindled. With the help of some acquaintances in Allahabad, he opened a small factory there, in the same city where his Prayag pharmacy had failed 15 years before. He moved to Allahabad with his son Vrindavan and continued manufacturing medicines. While the rest of the family remained at Banerjee Lane in Calcutta, Abhay continued his traveling, but now he was often away for months at a time. And then he had a dream a second time. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati appeared before him. Again, he was beckoning, indicating that Abhay should take sannyas. And again, Abhay had to put the dream aside. He was a householder with many responsibilities. To take sannyas would mean to give up everything. He had to earn money. He now had 5 children. Why is Guru Maharaj asking to take sannyas? He thought it was not possible now. The Allahabad business was unsuccessful. At present, the condition of our business is not very good. He wrote his servant Gauranga, who had asked to rejoin him. When the condition gets better, and if you are free at the time, I will call for you. He worked earnestly, but results were meager. As with everything else, Abhay saw his present circumstances through the eyes of scripture, and he couldn't help but think of verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. यशशाम अनुगृह्णामि हरिष्ये तदधानं समे तत्तदन्नं त्याजन्तस्य स्वजनदुःखदुःखितम्. When I feel especially merciful towards someone, I gradually take away all his material possessions, his friends and relatives, then reject this poverty-stricken and most wretched fellow. He had heard Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati quote the verse, and now he thought of it often. He took it that his present circumstances were controlled by Lord Krishna, who was forcing him to helpless position, freeing him for preaching Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada, somehow or other, my intention for preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu increased and the other side decreased. I was not disinclined, but Krishna forced me, you must give it up. The history is known how it decreased, decreased, decreased. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Queen Kunti had also prayer. My dear Lord Krishna, your Lordship can easily be approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. One who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, and bodily beauty, cannot approach you with sincere feeling. Srila Prabhupada. So in 1950, I retired practically, not retired, but a little in touch with business. Whatever is going on, then almost became nil. Whatever was there, all right, you do so whatever you like. Our wife independently moved along with her sons back to her father's house at 72 Mahatma Gandhi Road. She had reasoned that her financial support was becoming precarious. After he was spending most of his time away from home, he was gradually dissociating himself from the family. When after several months he would meet his wife and children, his father-in-law would criticize him. You're always going outside, you're always worshipping God, you're not looking after my family. Whenever he could, Abhay could send his family some money. Mr. Sudhir Kumar Datta, Abhay's nephew, says, I sometimes noticed how he was thinking so many things about his family, about his writings, about making bigger and bigger in business, what to do, what to do. He was thinking seriously to earn more money from his business, but that means he has to give more time for his business. And his writing, he never give up. He was writing more and more, and people sometimes abused him. Hey, you are writing religious things. You are only thinking of God. Then who will maintain your family? What will you do for the family? Sometimes he argued with them. What has his family given me? Why should I forget about God? This is the real thing, what I am doing. You cannot realize what I am doing. On a visit to Calcutta, I stayed at the home of his father in law, where he has given his own room. When his wife served him dinner, he noticed that everything had been purchased from the market. How is this? He asked. The cook is sick today, Radharani replied. I thought it is better that we not live here at the home of our father, or else she will be spoiled even more. So he moved his family to a new address on Chetla Street. Here he sometimes stayed with his family for a few months, writing articles and doing a minimal amount of business. But most of the time he stayed in Allahabad. In Allahabad, Abhay, now 54, lived like a Banaprastha, or one who has retired from family life. He was indifferent to the activities of family and business, activities that family man generally considers his prime objects of responsibility and happiness. In his writings, Abhay had several times discussed the four ashramas or spiritual divisions of Vedic society: Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. In the first division, the Brahmacharya Ashram, a young boy's parents sent him to the place of the Guru, Gurukula, where he lives simple life, studying the Vedic literature under the guidance of his guru. Thus, in his childhood and youth, he learns principle of austerity and spiritual knowledge that form the basis of for his entire life. At age 21, the brahmachari can take a wife, thus enter the next ashrama, or grihastha or like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he may choose to remain a lifelong brahmachari. In his boyhood, Abhay had remained celibate and had imbibed the principle of devotion of Krishna from his father and mother. Although he had lived home, his upbringing had been the equivalent of brahmachari life. And by marriage, at the age of 21, he had entered the Grihastha ashram at the appropriate age. Gaur Mohan's example had shown Abhay how to remain a devotee of Krishna even in family life. And as Vaishnavas, Abhay and his wife had avoided the excesses of materialistic household life. At 50, a man is supposed to retire from his family activities, and this stage is called Banaprastha. In the Banaprastha ashram, both man and wife agree to abstain from further sexual contact. They may continue living together, but the emphasis on spiritual partnership. As Banaprasthas, they may travel together on pilgrimage to the holy places in India, preparing for the inevitable departure from the material world. Thus, the Vedic ashramas, after allowing one to fulfill material life, enable one to end the cycle of repeated birth and death and attain the eternal spiritual world. A man of 50 should be able to see by his aging body that inevitable death is approaching, and he should have the good sense to prepare. In the final division, the Sannyasha Ashram, the man places his wife in the care of a grown son and fully dedicates himself to serving the Supreme Lord. Formerly, the Sannyasa Ashram meant a solitary life of penances in the Himalayas, but in the Gaudiya Vaishnava line, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had emphasized preaching. Although Abhay had not formally defined his status within the four ashrams, he happened to believe more as the Vanaprastha than a Grahastha. He saw his business failures and his distasteful family situation as Krishna's blessings, freeing him from family responsibilities and turning him wholeheartedly towards executing Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's order to preach. In Allahabad, Abhay managed to save enough money to revive the printing of Back to Godhead, and in February 1932, from his editorial office and home at 57B Canning Road, the first issue in 80 years appeared. As before, he did everything himself, all the writing, typing, editing, meeting with the printer, and finally distributing the copies by hand as well as mailing them to respectable leaders throughout India. This, if held, was the real purpose of living in Allahabad or anywhere. This was the best use of money, the purpose of human life, to engage fully in glorifying the Supreme Lord. Other things were temporary and would soon be lost. When he visited his family in Calcutta, old friends would gather in his room and he would preach and give class on Bhagavad Gita. Abhay invited his wife and family to take part in the discussions, but they would resolute sit in an upstairs rooms, often taking tea as if in defiance of his preaching. Abhay was supporting them, he was still associating with them, but he was bent on preaching, and they were not making it attractive for him to do so within the family. If there were to be family life for Abhay, then his wife and sons would have to recognize and rejoice in the fact that he was becoming a full-fledged preacher. They would have to understand that his life's concern was to serve his spiritual master's mission. They could not simply ignore his transformation. They could not insist that he was simply an ordinary man. Abe continued to try to draw his wife in, hoping she would gradually follow him in the preacher's life. But she had not the slightest interest in her husband's preaching. And why should he spend his days worrying about family chemicals and money? Let his relatives criticize. But back to Godhead was the real service he could offer to the whole family of mankind. Madhavendra Puri, a great spiritual preceptor and predecessor of Lord Chaitanya, had written about the devotees' indifference to worldly criticism. O demigods and forefathers, please excuse me, I am unable to perform any more offerings to your pleasure for your pleasure. Now I have decided to free myself from all reactions to sins simply by remembering anywhere and everywhere the great descendant of Yadu and the great enemy of Kamsa, Lord Krishna. I think that this is sufficient for me. So, what is the use of further endeavors? Let the Sat moralist accuse me of being illusion. I don't mind. Experts in Vedic activities may slander me as being misled. Friends and relatives may call me frustrated. My brothers may call me fool. The wealthy Mammonites may point me out as mad, and the land philosophers may assert that I am such too proud. Still, my mind doesn't buzz an inch from the determination to serve the lotus feet of Govinda, though I unable to do it. Why should he waste time with petty family problems when he had answers to problems of India and the world? As a knower of Bhagavad Gita, he felt that his first obligation was to offer solutions to the complex crises of war, hunger, immorality, crime, all symptoms of godlessness. And if dedicating himself to such work meant that other lesser responsibilities suffered, then there was no loss. In March 1952, Abhay published another issue of Back to Godhead. It was dedicated mostly to a biographical article Abhay had written about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and his father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, vehemently protested against the principles of those pseudo-transcendentalists now passed in the name of Lord Chaitanya. He initiated the reformatory movement by literary contributions while still engaged as a high command officer. During his householder life and serving as magistrate, he wrote books of various descriptions in Bengali, English, Sanskrit, and etc. to present an actual picture of pure devotional service activities to Lord Chaitanya. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj got inspiration from his very childhood all about Srila Thakur Bhakti Vinod movement. He worked as a private secretary of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and as such, Bhakti Vinod Thakur gave him Srila Saraswati Thakur the transcendental power of attorney to espouse the cause of Lord Chaitanya. And so, after Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur's departure, Srila Saraswati Thakur took up reins of that reformatory movement. Absorbed in producing his monthly journal, Abhay went about his other activities only superficially. Sometimes he traveled on business or taking the night train from Allahabad to Calcutta, visited his family. When his compartment was not crowded, he would turn on a light while others slept. Riding a night train provided a good opportunity to think or even write. Sometimes he would sleep for a few hours and sit up again and look out the window to see only night and the reflected lights of the train compartment shining back at him, the windows reflecting his face. Halfway through the 12-hour journey, the sky would lighten, turning from grey to light blue, and the first white clouds would appear in the sky. He could see lights in the towns and hear the train horn whirring. When the train slowed and stopped at a station, tea vendors would walk alongside the train windows yelling, "Chai, chai, chai." The loud sing song then filling the ears with chai, and chai filling the air with its aroma as hundreds of passengers sipped their morning tea. During his more than 20 years of extensive train travel, Abba had noticed more and more people smoking cigarettes and more women traveling alone. India was becoming westernized, and the national leaders were paving the way, the blind leading the blind. They wanted the kingdom of God without God. They wanted a progressive industrialized India without Krishna. From the windows, he could see large fields being left uncultivated, and yet people were hungry. Abhay would sometimes read a newspaper and cut out an article that seemed to warrant a reply and back to Godhead, or that sparked an idea for an essay. He would deliberate over how to approach people for assistance, whom to approach, and how to start a society of Krishna conscious devotees. People not only in India but all over the world could take to Krishna consciousness. The Chaitanya Bhagavata had predicted that the name of Lord Chaitanya would one day be known in every town and village. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had predicted that the name of Lord Chaitanya would one day be known in every town and village. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had wanted that. He had sent preachers to England, but they had only gained a protocol visit with the royalty, stood in line, bowed before the crown, and then come back to India without affecting any change in the Western people. Abhay thought about sending back to God abroad. His agent Tucker, Speak and Company had contacts in America and Europe. People read English all over the world, and some of them would surely appreciate the ideas from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. This was what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had wanted. Krishna consciousness was not for India alone, it was India's greatest gift, and it was for everyone. So, with this, we have completed this chapter number 6. In the next session or next episode, we will start with chapter number 7, the entitled Jhansi, the League of Devotees. So, we will stop here. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.